My name is Celia Rawl. I'm 38 years old. I came to the holiday lunch with my kids, already ready for that normal tightness in my chest. That feeling always shows up before my family does. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee that had been cooking too long. I could hear the sound of forks and knives clinking and people talking quietly in the dining room. For a second, standing at the door with Ava's coat over my arm, it almost felt like a normal family get-together. Then my dad leaned toward me. His hand was still on the door like he was stopping cold air from coming in. His voice got quiet, like a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "We were hoping to keep today peaceful. Why are you even here?" He didn't say it like a question. He said it like I had broken a rule by showing up where I was supposed to be. For a few seconds, everything in the dining room slowed down. The table got quiet. Not completely quiet, but quiet enough that everyone heard and decided to pretend. They hadn't. My mother kept herself busy with a napkin that didn't need fixing. My sister Monica looked down at her phone, scrolling through nothing. No one looked at me. I felt Ava move next to me. We hadn't even sat down yet. My shoes hadn't even stopped clicking on the wood floor. Ava's voice came soft but steady, surprisingly calm even though the air felt thick. "Do you want to go?" She asked, like she was giving me a way out instead of the other way around. I swallowed. My throat suddenly felt dry. "Yeah," I said. "We're leaving." No yelling, no speeches, no big scene where I finally lost it and told everyone exactly what I thought of them. Just a small turn, and then we were walking back toward the door like we'd forgotten something in the car. Behind us, chairs scraped, forks and knives clinked. Someone cleared their throat. No one followed. I helped my younger one back into their coat, handed Ava hers, and stepped back out into the cold. The door shut behind us with a quiet final click that felt louder than any slammed door could have. As we walked down the driveway, the weight of what had just happened pressed on me. Not as a surprise, but as proof, this was who they were when they weren't pretending for anyone. I drove in silence for a while. The windshield wipers squeaked across glass that didn't really need wiping. The kids watched the houses slide by in. The windows. Their faces were pale with the early winter light. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. My knuckles were pale, my jaw was tight as I replayed my dad's words over and over. "We were hoping to keep today peaceful. Why are you even here?" It hit me that he meant it. That he really believed my being there was the problem. Like I was the noise, the mess, the thing that broke their carefully chosen version of family. Somewhere. In the middle of an empty road, Ava finally spoke. She didn't sound angry or sad. She sounded tired. "You tried," she said. "That's more than they deserved." Her words hit harder than my dad's had. Not because they hurt, but because they were true in a way I hadn't let myself admit. I realized. She'd been watching all along, quietly keeping track of all the times I walked into rooms where I wasn't wanted. All the times I swallowed mean comments and smiled through tension. All the times I brought her with me, hoping something would be different. We got home and I did what I always do when I don't know what to do. I went to the kitchen. I made pancakes like it was any other slow morning, even though my hands still shook a little when I cracked the eggs. The kids played music on a speaker, something upbeat and a little too loud, and the house started to feel like ours again instead of part of theirs. Ava stayed at the counter, telling me about a math test she hadn't studied for and somehow still got all the answers right. She waved her fork in the air like she was giving a speech about last-minute miracles. Life moved. The pancake batter sizzled. Plates were passed. Syrup dripped out. If someone had walked in right then, they would have thought this was a normal Sunday. But in the background of my mind, something new had started ticking. It wasn't the usual anger that came and went like bad weather. It was exact. A kind of cold, quiet focus I hadn't felt before. Like a line had finally been drawn, and I was standing on the other side of it, getting a clear view of the past. After the plates were rinsed and the kids went off to their rooms, I checked the date on my phone. Monica's rent was due the next morning. For the last 8 months, I had been quietly sending $1,300 into her bank account at the start of every month. I told myself I was helping her get back on her feet, that she'd pay me back when things got better. that it was temporary, that this is what family did. I told myself a lot of things. But standing in my kitchen, still hearing my dad's whisper in my head, all that giving suddenly felt less like kindness and more like a rope they'd wrapped around my neck using my own hands. I pulled up my text messages with Monica and scrolled back to last spring, to all the messages where she'd begged for help. Rent went up, hours cut at work. I don't know what I'm going to do, she'd written. I'll pay you back, I promise. Back then, I'd read those words with a soft heart and an open wallet. Now I looked at them with clear eyes and took a screenshot. Then another of the bank transfers. One after another, month after month, proof of every time I stepped in where our parents should have. I opened a new message. Not just to Monica, but to both of our parents in the family group chat. The same one filled with holiday plans, meme comments, and pictures of my mother's new table decorations. My thumb stayed over the screen as I thought about how many times I'd let them change the story. How many times I'd let them make me look selfish or dramatic while quietly doing the work they dropped. This time I wasn't going to explain. I wasn't going to beg them to understand, I typed. Since I wasn't supposed to be at lunch, I'm guessing I'm not supposed to keep paying Monica's rent either. That ends tomorrow. Thought you should know. No emojis, no softening, no love you. At the end, just facts. I read it twice, feeling my heartbeat in my ears, then hit send. I watched the little delivered notification pop up and set the phone down on the counter like I just placed a heavy object exactly where it needed to. 5 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. First it was Monica calling. Then again. I let it ring out, staring at the screen until it went dark. A line of texts followed, one after another. Wait, what happened? Did Dad say something again? Can we talk? Each message was shorter, more frantic than the last, like she was trying different words to get a reaction from me. I didn't respond. It wasn't her I was punishing, and deep down, I knew it had never really been her. Monica had always been their favorite, the golden one who learned early how to play the game. How to stay just close enough to their expectations to be rewarded. It wasn't her fault she fit into their story better than I ever did. But I was done carrying responsibilities that belonged to them. For once I let the silence be my answer, even though my stomach twisted with the need to explain, to comfort, to fix. That night, around 11:30, another text came in, this time from my mom. We can talk tomorrow. Don't do anything drastic. The words made me laugh quietly in the dark, not because they were funny, but because of how predictable they were. Anything that threatened their comfort was drastic. Me stepping back, me setting boundaries, me refusing to show up and play my assigned role, it all became some dangerous act she needed to gently guide me away from. I didn't reply. I plugged my phone in, turned it face down on the nightstand, and lay there staring at the ceiling as the house settled around me. Somewhere across town, Monica was packing bags. They'd decided she was better off under their roof than dealing with my moods. I could almost hear the conversation. It took less than 24 hours for my dad's whisper at the door to turn into a full reshuffling of where everyone belonged. By the next evening, Monica called again, but this time from a different number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. Her voice came through in a rush. They're making me pack, she said without saying hello. They're making me move in with them. For a second, I just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear. The picture forming in my mind was so clear, it almost felt like a memory instead of a guess. Monica in her old bedroom, boxes stacked against the wall, my mother hovering, my father pacing. I couldn't help it. A short, disbelieving laugh escaped me. Not because any of it was funny, but because of how neatly everything was happening without me lifting another finger after that one text. I had simply made a choice and gravity did the rest. I told her I heard her, that I hoped she'd be okay. But I didn't offer to fix it. When we hung up, the silence in my apartment felt different. Not empty, just honest. Monica lasted exactly 3 days at our parents' house before she cracked. On the 4th morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing itself halfway off the nightstand. Missed calls, a voice message that was 6 minutes long. A dozen messages stacked on top of each other like she was trying to burst through a locked door. I didn't listen to the voice message. I didn't need to. I knew that tone by now. The overwhelmed confusion, the dawning realization, the way her sentences would tangle as she tried to explain how something that looked like stability from the outside felt like suffocation from the inside. By noon, another text came through. No voice message attached this time. Just 3 words sitting there on the screen. I get it now. I stared at those words for a long time, thumb hovering over the reply button, and then pulling back. For years I'd been trying to explain what it was like to be on the outside of our parents' affection. To be the one who only got called when there was a bill to pay or a problem to fix. Now for the first time, Monica didn't need me to explain. She had lived it. And that changed everything, even if neither of us knew yet just how far the fallout would reach. Monica's message sat on my screen for hours before I finally put the phone face down and focused on the one thing I could control: Ava's birthday. It was supposed to be simple this year. A few of her closest friends, pizza, a cake she picked out herself, and a movie she'd been begging me to watch with her for weeks. No decorations made to impress relatives, no forced smiles, no pretending. Just us, and after everything that had happened at lunch, Ava needed that simplicity more than I realized. The house felt lighter as her friends came in, leaving jackets in a pile by the door and filling the living room with laughter that never once felt fake. I watched Ava glow in the soft lamplight. Her face was open and relaxed. The weight she'd carried the last few weeks suddenly wasn't sitting so heavily on her shoulders. Her grandparents had ignored her birthday post online. No comment, no like, no text. Not even the lazy happy birthday sweetheart they used to send at the last possible minute, like checking off a chore. But Ava didn't mention them, not once. She was learning what I had learned slowly and painfully: silence is also an answer. 20 minutes after the party started, the front door opened without a knock. Monica stepped inside. Her hair was a mess, her sweatshirt was inside out. She was holding a small gift bag and a bottle of cheap wine like she'd run out of a burning building. But the moment she saw Ava, her whole face softened. She hugged her tight, whispered something that made Ava smile, and then drifted into the living room like she belonged there. Like she had always belonged there. She helped slice pizza, passed out plates, teased one of Ava's friends about their lopsided cupcake decorating skills. If you didn't know any better, you would have thought she'd been part of our day-to-day life forever instead of orbiting around our parents' expectations like a satellite. Later, after cake and gifts and a movie where half the kids fell asleep, in a pile on the couch, Monica waited until we were clearing plates to ask, "Can we talk?" Her voice wasn't nervous. It was tired, the kind of tired that sits deep in your bones. We stepped outside onto the porch where the cold air rocked around. It's like a wake-up slap. Monica leaned against the railing, rubbing her forehead like she was trying to press the right words out. "It's worse than I thought," she said finally. "Mom, it's like she's performing sadness every minute." "And Dad?" She shook her head, letting out a humorless laugh. "He walks around like a prison guard. Yesterday, I made pasta and he lectured me for 10 minutes about how I'm ruining his garlic. His garlic." I didn't interrupt. I didn't tell her I knew exactly what she meant. I just let her talk. "They said you're being dramatic," she continued. "That you're trying to get attention. That you brought all this on yourself." Her eyes lifted to mine. "But I told them they're wrong." Something in her voice cracked. Not weak, just honest. Stripped. Like survival mode had been peeled away and she finally had space to understand what she'd been protected from all those years. She wasn't crying, but something in her face made me want to cry for her. For the version of her that thought being the favorite was protection instead of a trap. "You're not trying to punish anyone," she said softly. "You're just refusing to keep pretending, and they hate that more than anything." I nodded because there was nothing else left to say. She finally saw it, not because I told her but because she lived it. And that was a door you couldn't close again. Monica left around 10 o'clock. The house returned to its quiet. Ava curled on the couch under a blanket, scrolling through photos from her party. I was heading toward bed when my phone buzzed with a text from Monica. When I opened it, I had to blink twice to make sure I read it right. "I'm giving them a choice," she wrote. "Either they apologize to you and Ava, or I'm moving Dylan in." Dylan with the sleeve tattoos, the lifted truck, the chain wallet, and the turtle he once brought to Thanksgiving like it was a normal thing to do. My parents hated him so much that just mentioning his name made them noticeably tense. My mother used to whisper intense whenever he came up in conversation, like she was describing a wild animal rather than a man who showed up for Monica more consistently than anyone else ever had. I hadn't asked her to make that threat. I hadn't even hinted at it, but she did anyway, voluntarily. And something shifted in me then. This wasn't about choosing sides. It wasn't about loyalty. It was about clarity. Monica had lived under their roof for 3 days and finally saw what I had been trying to explain my whole life. She wasn't picking me. She was choosing not to be controlled anymore. And that made all the difference. 3 days later at 4:30 on the dot, my parents' car pulled up in front of my house. My mother wore pearls, the ones she always saved for holidays or moments where she wanted to look like the wounded mother holding her family together with trembling grace. My father wore one of his golf shirts, the formal casual uniform he put on whenever he needed to appear respectable. Ava and I watched from the window, neither of us moving until they knocked twice. Loud enough to announce themselves, gentle enough to seem polite. A performance in 2 taps. When I finally opened the door, we didn't invite them in. Not right away. We stood on the porch like neighbors having a conversation. My father cleared his throat. "I was wrong about what I said," he said, stiff, clipped, as if he were adjusting a number on a spreadsheet rather than admitting that he'd embarrassed me in front of my children. My mother followed with a tight smile. "We want to move forward. We don't want to dwell on all of this. No mention of Ava, no mention of the years of cold shoulders. No mention of the lunch. Just a few words meant to patch a wound they refused to look at. But I didn't argue. I didn't push, I didn't correct them. I simply said, all right, if you're ready to move forward, we'll see how that looks." They smiled like they had accomplished something huge, like the hard part was over, like I'd let them back in just enough for them to take over again. But they were wrong. I wasn't angry anymore. And that, ironically, was what made me dangerous to them. Because I wasn't seeking justice or revenge. I wasn't seeking anything. I was simply done letting them break things I cared about. They left our porch like performers exiting a stage. When the door shut behind them, Ava dropped onto the couch with an exhausted groan. "That's what they call an apology," she muttered. I didn't answer. All I could hear was my father's stiff voice repeating in my head. I was wrong. Not sorry, just wrong. A mistake, not a wound. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but without replaying every word. I thought that might be the end of it, that they'd retreat into silence, that the worst was behind us. But I should have known better. Families like mine don't just let go. They regroup. They plan. And when they realize you're no longer playing their game, they create a new one. I just didn't know yet how far they were willing to go or how quickly things were about to fall apart again. The first sign that things were shifting again came on a Wednesday afternoon. Ava came home from school, dropped her backpack on the floor, and held out her phone like it was something dirty. "Grandma liked my birthday post," she said. "From 3 days ago." I took the phone from her, studied the lonely little heart sitting under a photo she'd already forgotten about posting. I checked my own profile, nothing. No like, no text, no message, no acknowledgement. Not even the bare minimum birthday greeting. They could have typed out in the time it took them to breathe. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't an oversight. It was on purpose, a small calculated move meant to send a message. If I removed myself from the family, they would remove themselves. From my daughter. "Do you think they'll come around?" Ava asked. Her voice was light, but her eyes weren't. She'd always been sharper than people gave her credit for. "Do you care?" I asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not anymore." We had a quiet celebration planned for that night. Leftover cake, candles relit just for fun, and a rented movie. But even in the coziness of our living room, My mind kept drifting back to that single heart on Ava's post. It was too clean, too neat, too timed. A soft pressure point disguised as affection. Someone in their circle had told them to do it. Someone had suggested a path toward appearing like the hurt party. That was the thing about my parents. When they started losing control, they didn't apologize. They gathered an audience. It didn't take long to see the pattern. On Friday morning, I got a call from Monica. "So, something new," she said, sounding breathless. "Dad walked into the kitchen and asked if I'd talked to you yet." When I said no, he looked disappointed, like he expected me to report back. She paused. "They think you're damaging Ava. They said you're poisoning her against the family." A cold, flaring anger lit behind my ribs. Not hot rage. Cold, clean. The kind that made everything sharper. "And then what?" I asked. "Mom said they can still fix this," Monica said, voice flat. "But you have to choose what kind of life you want." She paused again. Like that was a normal thing to say. I gripped the edge of the table, the wood digging into my palm. It wasn't enough for them to reclaim Monica. Now they were trying to reclaim the story. If they couldn't make me the villain with silence, they'd do it with hints. But it didn't stop there. That evening, Ava walked into the living room holding her phone. "A cousin named Karen just sent me a voicemail," she said. Karen, my dad's sister's daughter. Someone we hadn't spoken to in years. The kind of relative who hovered around wedding buffets saying, "We should really catch up," and then never did. Ava pressed play. Karen's voice floated out, sticky sweet and too careful. "Hey, sweetheart," she cooed. "I heard there's been some tension in the family. Just wanted to say I'm here if you need to talk. Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be." I stopped it halfway through. "How did she get your number?" I asked. Ava shrugged. "I didn't give it to her." Of course she didn't. This wasn't care. It was information gathering. They were trying to gather witnesses, positioning themselves as the wounded ones, while painting me as unstable, dramatic, or overreacting. The friendliness was too broad, the concern too vague. A soft smear campaign dressed in pastel politeness. The next day, another message popped up. This time from an old neighbor who used to wave at us from across the street, but hadn't spoken to me in almost a decade. Then an old classmate. Then someone who knew my mom from church. Each message had the same tone. "I heard you're going through something. Praying for you." Picked clean of details, designed to imply without stating, perfectly deniable. By then, even Monica was feeling the pressure. She called me from her car, parked halfway down her new block, keys still in the ignition. "Dad's livid," she whispered, like saying it quietly would make it less true. "I told them Dylan and I found a place." They looked at me like I joined a cult. "You're really moving out?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. "And they're calling people." "Barb, Aunt Len called me yesterday. Said she's worried about you. Dad probably told her you're unstable or angry or something." I almost laughed then. Unstable for not letting them embarrass us at lunch. "That's what happens when you stop cooperating with their story," Monica said softly. "They turn you into the villain so they can stay the victims." It was the first time she'd ever said it out loud. We weren't fighting. We weren't arguing. We were aligned. And that was a strange, powerful thing. Later that night, Ava came into the kitchen with her laptop. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun that made her look older than 16. "Do you think they'll come after you next?" she asked. "Try to get your boss's number or something." I paused what I was doing. "I don't know," I said truthfully. But I wouldn't be surprised. People like my parents didn't let go. They scrambled. They pulled strings. They spun stories. They whispered to people who never should have been involved. They used distance as proof. They used silence as ammunition. But for the first time in my life, I had something they couldn't reach. Boundaries. And a daughter who trusted me. And a sister who finally saw the truth. By Monday, the silence started to change shape. It wasn't empty anymore. It was planned, polished. Hidden intention under layers of fake concern. People who hadn't spoken to me in years were suddenly appearing like actors stepping out from backstage, as if on cue. First, Kelly, someone I was close to in high school. She stayed in our hometown, drifted into my mother's church circle, and disappeared from my life once I moved away. Suddenly, she sent me a Facebook message. "Hey Barb, your mom mentioned you're going through some personal struggles. Just wanted to say I'm praying for you." No details, no context. Just a perfectly vague, perfectly manipulative message dressed in kind words. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, an old neighbor reached out with the same tone. Then another cousin. Then someone I barely remembered from my childhood. Message after message, woven together like soft threads of a lie. My mother wasn't trying to fix things. She was building a case. And she didn't care who she used to do it. The envelope showed. Up on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked between a grocery store flyer and a utility bill. Ava brought it in from the mailbox, turning it over in her hands like she already knew it wasn't good. My name was written on the front, neat, centered, no return address. No handwriting inside either. Just a plain white card with a fake gold border thick enough to feel expensive but empty enough to feel cold. The message was printed, not written. Family doesn't give up. Even when it's difficult, even when you're hurting, we love you. No signature, no hint of who actually sent it. Which made it worse, not better. I tossed it into the trash without a word. Ava didn't ask. She just watched it land at the bottom of the bin with a soft thud and nodded like it confirmed something she'd suspected. 16 should be too young to understand manipulation. But when you grow up around people like my parents, you learn the signs early. That night, Monica called again. I could tell immediately something had shifted. The way she was breathing fast, like she'd been pacing. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Mom called Dylan again." "What do you mean again?" "She invited him over," Monica said. "Alone. Said she wanted to make him feel welcome. Chat. Get to know him. She asked if he'd ever thought about getting a job closer to the family." I sat very still, staring at the ceiling as her words sank in. My mother, the same woman who once made Monica throw out a birthday gift Dylan gave her because she thought it looked criminal, now wanted to have tea with him. "She's trying to recruit him," I said quietly. "Yes," Monica exhaled heavy. "She thinks he'll tell her something. Something about you, about me, about us moving. She keeps trying to get him alone. Twice this week." "She's losing control," I said. "And when she loses control, she tries to charm her way back into it." "That's not charm," Monica snapped. "That's strategy." Before I could answer, Ava stepped into the room holding her laptop. "Mom, a counselor from school left a message. Something about needing to confirm some information from a family call they got earlier." My stomach dropped. "What call?" Ava set her laptop on the table and pulled up the voicemail. The counselor sounded polite. Too polite. The kind of polite that meant something uncomfortable had happened. "Hi. Just calling to let you know we received a message from your daughter's grandmother earlier today. She expressed concern about possible emotional distress in the home and asked if we had resources for families experiencing instability. We're not taking any action, but the call has been logged. Feel free to call back if you'd like to discuss." Ava looked at me slowly. "She said she was my primary female elder," she said, using air quotes like she'd practiced. I felt a cold wave move through me, slow and unmistakable. This wasn't vague rumor or soft pressure anymore. This was documentation. This was my mother, attempting to create a paper trail. One that painted me as a danger to my own child. One that could be misunderstood in ways that suddenly had weight. I called the school immediately. The counselor's tone on the phone was careful, measured, as if she needed to stay professional and neutral. "We aren't pursuing anything," she repeated. But the call was unusual. "We just have to record it." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in silence while Ava paced the kitchen, muttering under her breath about how insane this was. But I didn't speak. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I calculated if they wanted to escalate, then fine. I could finish what they started. But I wouldn't let them turn Ava into a pawn. That night, long after the kids went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table and began going through everything. Every voicemail, every screenshot, every message from Monica, every missed call, every unreturned text, every documented moment they'd tried to wedge themselves into our lives while insisting it was love. I saved copies of each one, organized them into folders, dated them, timestamped them. I didn't know yet what I'd use them for, but I knew I'd need them. People like my parents always relied on confusion, on blurred lines, on plausible deniability. Information was clarity, and clarity was power. The next morning I called Monica. They threatened to cut you off, right? Yeah, she said wearily. Well, I said, they can't cut you off if they don't have anything left to hold over you. She inhaled sharply. Barb, what are you planning? Nothing big, I said. Just the final nail. I opened the group family message. The same thread where my mother sent holiday reminders and photos of her new silverware set. The same thread where my father sent articles titled things like How to Raise Resilient Children, like he'd ever raised one. The same thread where they pretended we were a happy family in carefully chosen snapshots. I typed slowly, carefully. Since there seems to be confusion, Ava and I are fine. Monica is fine. What's not fine is the repeated interference, the false concern, the calls to her school, and the manipulation. If you continue trying to wedge yourselves into our lives under the guise of help, we will treat it as harassment. No threats, no insults, no emotional pleas. Just clarity. Then I hit send. And blocked both of them. That kind of silence, the silence after you slam a door they never expected. You to close was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. 2 days later, Monica showed up at my door again. No warning, no text. Just a knock and her standing there with her keys in one hand and Dylan behind her holding a tote bag full of groceries and a folding chair. They're begging, she said quietly. Begging me to talk to you, to fix this, to smooth it over. What made them change their tone? I asked. Monica gave a tired smile. I told them Dylan's moving in next week unless they get their act together. And I told them I'm done protecting their feelings. I looked at Dylan. He shrugged. They hate me, he said, but they fear her more. 3 days later, like clockwork, their car pulled up in front of my house again. But this time it was different. There were no pearls, no golf shirt, no props for the performance. They looked older, smaller, like people who finally realized the story they'd built was cracking in their hands. We didn't rush to the door. We let them knock twice. Then Ava opened it. You here to apologize? She asked. My mother nodded, slow, hesitant. To both of us? Another nod. We let them in, not because we needed them back, but because they needed to say the words out loud. We didn't offer them anything. Not water, not coffee, not the illusion of comfort. They sat on the couch like visitors in a stranger's home. Their hands were folded too carefully, their postures too stiff. Ava settled next to me with her arms crossed, chin lifted just enough to make it clear she wasn't going to play the polite granddaughter today. Monica and Dylan stood by the doorway, silent witnesses to a moment our parents never thought they'd have to face. My father cleared his throat. It was the same sound he used to make before delivering one of his long, weary lectures about responsibility. Or respect. Except this time there was no lecture. Just a single line spoken like he was reading from an index card he'd practiced in the car. We pushed you away, he said. That's on us. My mother followed, smoothing her hands over her skirt the way she always did when she was preparing to look wounded. We let things fall apart for too long, she said. Her voice was soft but too controlled, and then we tried to force them back together. That wasn't right. It wasn't warm, it wasn't profound. It wasn't even particularly heartfelt. But it was something they had never offered before. Not denial, not justification, not performance. Just acknowledgement. Clipped and incomplete, but theirs. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the air felt still. Ava was the one who broke the silence. Her voice was flat and unwavering. You made me feel like I didn't matter. she said. You ignored my birthday. My mother blinked, startled, as if the idea that a 16-year-old could hold her accountable had never crossed her mind. Ava, sweetheart. No, Ava said, standing straighter. You don't get to call me that right now. Something in my mother's expression faltered. My father looked down at his hands. Whatever script they'd rehearsed, whatever version of events they'd prepared to present, it didn't include being confronted by the granddaughter they had treated like collateral damage. I didn't add anything. I didn't soothe. I didn't rescue them from the discomfort they had earned. We're not going back to how things were, I said quietly. If we move forward, it's going to look different. My father nodded, slow and resigned. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to say something tender, something pretty, something performative. But nothing came out. They understood, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't a negotiation. They weren't getting their authority back. They weren't reclaiming the story. They weren't walking out of my house with the power they came in with. They stayed for exactly 11 minutes. Then my father stood, cleared his throat again, and said, We hope this is a start. My mother paused at the doorway, turning back to Ava like she expected the old rhythm to return. Like she expected Ava to smile and soften and fill the moment for her. We hope you'll come by sometime, she said. Ava just nodded once. Polite, distant, uncommitted. A nod that said, maybe, but definitely not now. Maybe, but only on her terms. When the door closed behind them, the house fell into a strange, weightless quiet. A quiet that wasn't heavy or tense or full of waiting. A quiet that felt clean. We all stood there for a moment, suspended in the aftermath. Then Dylan scratched the back of his head and said, So, does this mean I'm not moving in? Monica snorted, leaning into him. Oh no, she said. You're absolutely bringing your drums. And just like that, something inside me cracked. Not from pain, but from relief. I laughed, really laughed. Not the tight, polite laugh I used to use around my parents. Not the exhausted, brittle laugh of someone trying to prove she's okay. A full, unguarded laugh that felt like it loosened something stuck deep in my chest. Monica started laughing too. Then Ava burst out laughing so hard she had to hold the wall to steady herself. Even Dylan grinned, shaking his head like he'd walked into a sitcom he didn't realize he'd been starring in. It wasn't a victory celebration. It wasn't triumph. It was the sound of something finally stopping. The sound of a cycle breaking in real time. Later that evening, when everyone had gone home and the house had gone still again, Ava curled up beside me on the couch. Do you think things will get better now? She asked. Not hopeful, not fearful. Just curious. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. I think things will be honest now, I said. And that's enough, because the truth was simple. My parents hadn't magically changed. They weren't transformed by guilt or revelation. They were scared. Scared of losing control. Scared of losing the story they'd spent years crafting. Scared of losing the image of a family that never really existed in the first place. But I wasn't scared anymore. Monica wasn't scared anymore. And Ava, she had already learned the most important lesson of all. That family isn't the people who claim you. It's the people who don't break you. We didn't win. We simply stopped losing.